Well, you're not the only one with
So-
woes. Before you got on here, Sarah was telling me that one of her boys got bit by a dog the other day, and so they're
gosh.
dealing with that because he
Yep.
yeah he you know just that kind of weak, you know.
Yep.
There's-
It feels like there's a lot going on. Everybody, like everyone's got big stuff. It's wild.
There's nothing that rattle. At least I think I've only had it happen one time, and I've grown up with animals my whole life. But getting bit by a dog, especially when you're not expecting to get bit by a dog, holy crap, that rattles your psyche.
Yeah.
Because you're just so used to, at least me, I'm so used to being like friendly with dogs.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you just like see them that they have that capacity.
Yeah. I'm amazed. I mean, he's 3 years old, and he is like, as we got home from the hospital, and I mean, it was 17 stitches in 3 different places, and they didn't even touch the ones on the inside of his mouth. And he gets home, and I have these 2 huge guard dogs. I mean, they weigh as much as I do, and they kind of put their front feet in the pickup because they know something happened. And he says, "Here, look what happened. You can see I got stitches." And like, he was like, the dogs were like my dogs, not the ones that bit him, were right here. And he's just happy as can be. He hasn't showed any trace of being scared of dogs now. It's kind of amazing. Just, I guess, the grace of a child. He goes, he was sorry. He didn't mean it. And he's just like pressing on. Yeah, it's very admirable. I told him when kind of everything was all over, because, you know, I had to hold him down for the stitches, and I said, "I'm really sorry I wasn't there to protect you when that dog bit you, because I was just too far away." And he says, "It's okay, Mom. You ran as fast as you could when you heard me cry." I'm like, "Dude, you're not supposed to be making me feel better. I'm supposed to be making you feel better." It was amazing. So the grace of a child is amazing. Pretty
I
humbling.
recall, yeah,
Back when we talked with,
I definitely
with,
was not having those thoughts when I got bit.
Yeah. Well, remember, Joe, back when we talked with Ricky, he was expounding a little bit upon how you can raise kids and how you can help them be kind of tough, you know, from a young age, where they can get their 22 and go out in the hills by themselves and stuff and survive. Sounds like that's kind of coming together for you guys pretty well. You've got, you got
Yeah.
tough kids at least.
I do. I have very tough kids. I hope I'm not missing something, but they are tough, that's for sure. And like I said, graceful. The amount of grace behind that is educational.
So other than the dog biting, how has the summer been going for y'all?
It's good. Weather-wise, we have had the most amazing weather. It's been mild and rainy and all the things that we were praying for last year when we were droughted out and windy and all the stuff. I think we've had, I don't know how many inches we've had, but I bet we haven't gone longer than 10 days without rain, which is pretty rare out here and wonderful. So that's always eases stress quite a bit to have good precipitation. And yeah, everything's pretty good out here. That's for sure.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, we had an unseasonably cool and wet June as well.
Good.
And it was like, I mean, you know how it is, but in Virginia, especially when there's a little bit of elevation, I was like, you couldn't graze the grass down fast enough. It was crazy how well it was growing for being summertime.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got wildflowers everywhere, which is, it just feels like everything's happy. It's a great feeling, especially after last year. It was so sad last year, how hot and dry and windy, and it's like we kind of, I don't know. They always say it ends at the end of the drought. Ricky always says that. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
we made it, and it feels good to be through it. So,
You know, I talked to you about how I'm doing that ulcer treatment on a mule. And because I was like, man, I'm usually not the person who, I'm probably like every hard-headed like horsemanship guy. I'm not the like medical problem first guy, right? But I was just dealing with him, and I was like, I just feel like his stomach hurts. Like he's not being sentient or like grab myself and get ready to buck type of way. It's like don't touch me there. It like doesn't feel good there. And then I talked to these people and I was like, hey, like I've got this thing. I've done it with some of my horses and it's worked really well. You can try it if you want. If not, it's your animal. Totally up to you guys. And they said, oh, let's give it a try. And they're like, yeah, the people we bought him from, he was a mule there that was just kind of like there for aesthetic at this like I guess like historic plantation thing, right? He's like, but the people that work there, him and the other mule, they used to buy him bags of gummy worms and feed him gummy worms every day. And they were like, yeah, and we got him, and the other mule died for some reason, and they never figured out why. And I was like, probably because you're feeding them like I'm talking about pounds and pounds of gummy worms. And so they said all that, and I was like, I feel a lot better about my hunch now. So anyway,
Yeah.
he's like 3 or 4 days into it, so it just got started. But I just like, if we hadn't have done the first podcast with you, one, wouldn't have been on the lookout for it, but two, hopefully it works out, but two, wouldn't have had a way to address it. So it'll be interesting to see, because I guess you said you've never heard of it being done with a mule before, right?
Yeah, I don't know of anybody that has done it with a mule, but it's the same system, so of course it should work.
Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah.
Yep.
exactly. So
It'll
anyway, the moral of that story is there's people out there who feed their equine gummy worms, and that kind of rocked my world when I heard that. But anyway,
Yeah. Lots of There's a lot of things people do and a lot of things people get away with. That's for sure.
yeah.
At the expense of that poor animal, but
Hey, everybody. If you enjoy the podcast, if you find it entertaining or informative, or maybe we just fill the void in somebody's boring day out there, but head over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave us a review and follow the podcast. And what would really help is if you share this with a friend. That's how it spreads. We're also on the social media platforms, so head on over there, like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram, and we're on YouTube as well. All these things really help the channel grow, helps us stay on the move and continue to create great content and bring on more guests. Thank you, guys.
Where are you, Sarah?
I'm in, we call it like our loft. So our house is teeny tiny and we're super efficient with our space. So what used to be our bedroom is now like our office, and you can only stand all the way up in the middle. So it looks kind of weird. I was trying to figure out I got my longhorn back there, but
Oh yeah.
yeah,
I saw.
but
That's why I was asking. It looks like this. I was like, the ceiling looks low. It's almost like she's in some kind of like longhouse or something.
Yeah. We went from living in a horse trailer, not a living quarters horse trailer, but just living in a trailer, being on the road all the time. So then when we made like kind of the layout for this to build it, and Ricky can do all that in his head, we felt like this was going to feel massive compared to the nose of a horse trailer. So, which it was, and it's great. And then once we had kids, we had to add on, and and now it's just a nook that we are never in, pretty much. So
were you in like what kind of trailer? Like a one with a tack room, and then you slept in the tack room?
I think it was like I forget how long, but the one, what's the lingo? The straight wall was like, it was just a tack room, and then we had a little mini fridge and a coffee pot and a mattress, and then we just showered wherever we could shower and pre-planned. I mean, if we had to stay in a hotel, we would for hygiene, but that was what we tried to do most often. And then it was just a big enough tack room that then the other half was gear and vet stuff and whatever else, clothes.
Yeah, I gotcha. That sounds like, not that we're living out of it, but my fiance and I, that's our setup now.
Okay.
And we just, anytime we have to go anywhere, we just kind of camp like that. And I guess you just like ran power to the mini fridge, or?
Yeah, we had how did we do it? It was Ricky just put like a plug through the outside that was waterproof on the outside, and so it had an inside plug, and then we plugged up the coffee pot and the mini fridge and whatever else we'd need power for from in there. And we thought, I mean, it was great. I'm a pretty simple person. I loved it, but looking back now, I guess people have it pretty fancy. And we lived out of suitcases, and it just was easy, very simple.
How long had you, I guess, been dating him before that lifestyle started?
That pretty much started when we left Montana. So a year, I guess. I don't know. It's all kind of a blur timeline wise. We're not really anniversary people.
I see.
Probably about a year, and then we did that for another two or 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to think pretty hard about that. Something like that. It was a while.
Yeah. But you had you knew him pretty well at that point.
Yeah, we had talked on the phone for like a year and a half before we saw each other again, so we got to know each other pretty good. And then once we were, like I said, I don't know what you'd categorize any of it, but we just went for it.
Yeah. And that is like the run off with the cowboy across the country type fantasy, isn't it?
Yeah,
you were plumb ruined at that point.
People asked my dad that at our wedding, actually. Did you ever think this would happen? He's like, not really, but I'm not surprised. It was always funny. So anyway.
Ben, you're back.
I am. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. I think we're still working with the delay, but we can at least hear you now.
Yeah, the fact that you replied to me like a good 5 seconds later, I think you're right. But anyhow.
I think you're right.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, right. Sarah was just, because I think we're still recording, so we'll just run it however. But Sarah was explaining their non-living quarters trailer setup, and basically how that translated to them now having a, what did you say? Space efficient.
Yes.
Cozy.
Exactly. Yes.
A realtor would call it cozy.
Yeah.
They're home now. So.
Yep. It's not. Once we had kids, we added on, and it's probably normal size now. But I don't know. What's that mean? I don't know what that means. It's small.
I don't have a very big house at all, but it's perfect for the two of us. So I understand.
Yep. It's just more to clean.
How long were you guys? How long were you guys living in that trailer for?
I think maybe 4 years, something like that. I'll have to ask Ricky. I'll let you know. He's way better at that. Well, let's see. It was 08. Oh, it would have been 5 or 6 years, I guess. Because we didn't live in this house. We started working on it, but didn't live in it until after we were married. And then I had just found out I was pregnant when I told Ricky, I'm not going on the road anymore. I need a break. And then got to call him and say, hey, guess what? And so that was in 14, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so 5 years, 5.5 years we lived in that trailer on the road. Yep. I loved it.
Wow.
Simpler times.
And so when you guys would do that, that's not necessarily full time, right? Like that would be seasonal from spring to fall. Yeah,
there was a couple winters we stayed with our friend in Wickenburg for 2-3 months. And then I don't know what else we did in the winters. I think we just floated around. I don't remember. That's really bad. But relatively seasonal, and then bouncing around from place to place. And a friend of ours always say, trying to never stay anywhere long enough they get to know you so that they want you to come back. Just floated a little bit.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a gypsy.
Yeah. Never wear out your welcome.
Wh- So you're a person who's like very, I would say you're very talented, and very knowledgeable about the things that interest you. And then, you're talking like that, like, oh, time or this or that. I've been thinking about this a lot lately, especially as my job shifts to interacting with more and more people all the time, it seems like. Like, I know there's a handful of things that I feel pretty confident myself in, and then it's like, honestly, like a lot of the stuff that we talked about last time on the podcast with like horse health, and I guess kind of like the like biology, like veterinary, like that type of science type stuff. I feel like I struggle with it, and I like have to make myself learn that, as opposed to like numbers. Like I've always been a math guy. I have like I would say a pretty accurate like understanding of like a timeline. Like I got a good memory of like this happened and this happened and this happened and this happened and stuff. And it's always really interesting to me because obviously we have a lot of like phenomenal people on here. And it's not that they're like have a flaw necessarily, but it's like they're phenomenal at like whatever it is they're known for being phenomenal at. And then that you get this like super humanizing moment. Like for example, for us, when it's like you get maybe someone who's amazing with horses, and then you have to teach them how to like click a link on their email or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I guess where I'm going with this is with you being a very like self-aware person. What was that for you? Or maybe you didn't feel like you had that, but I'm noticing as I'm kind of like moving through my 20s and like establishing myself in the world a little bit more, I've pinpointed like a handful of things where it's like, I don't want to say I'm bad at them, but these are the things you're going to have to make yourself be better at. It's not just going to come to you. And as someone, at least on the outside looking in, when we talk to you, obviously everyone's human, you got all your stuff, but your life seems very put together and you seem very knowledgeable and stuff. So I'm curious to like figure out how you got there, because I assume you're probably like everybody else, you didn't start there. Does that make sense? That's a pretty long-winded thing to say, but I've been thinking about that lately, how it's like people have maybe something they're really good at or something they're really inclined to do, but most people that are just super, super, super highly specialized, they end up not being the most balanced people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what was the time when you were like, okay, I need to find some more balance here. I need to fill in some gaps or whatever.
The timing of that question is kind of wild with my life right now. I'm not sure if I know that. I don't think I know that answer, but I know exactly what you mean. There's everybody has their wheelhouse for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know. I've lately it's been on me and Ricky's conversations of just how to be better and more peaceful within who we are. You can only work on that. And then also having grace that like sometimes there's people that don't want to work on it. They just want to be exactly who they are. And like as a person that wants to be better all the time to probably a negative level, it can put people off like big time. So it's funny that you just asked that because I'm actively trying to be really aware of that. Like each person has their inclination. I remember an instance with a person who was a literal brain surgeon, professor of brain surgery. That's what it was. And there were people, and she was out of her element, and there was an immense amount of judgment on this lady. And I'll never forget that moment. I'll bet it was 5-6 years ago. And it was like, are you guys really saying that the brain surgeon is an unintelligent person? Like, are
Yeah.
we sure? Like, do we want to work on maybe categorizing that, or having grace that she's not in something she's worked hard on? Or, I mean, it was, so I'm probably not, I'm not answering the question at all. I feel you that I think it has to be a completely conscious, active act to try to be well-rounded, other than what comes natural to you. And I think,
Yeah.
grace is the word all the time. I think it's just a matter of having grace for where people are and what people's specialties are. And, it's like you're not going to make a cutting horse out of a Hanoverian. It's that same life analogy,
Sure.
and giving that Hanoverian grace for what it can do and embracing what it can do versus the, you know, CD lights bread, whatever, it's all relative, I'd say, and working at that. I think I've always wanted to be better if we're asking about my stuff, but it's not an easy thing for me. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you raised the point about how, because, that's kind of the whole deal with this podcast, right? On the move. We want to talk to people who are trying to get better and self-improvement. That's a big part of our ethos, I guess you'd say. But you make a good point that if you don't present that in the right way, it can be very off-putting for people.
Yeah.
And I'm like with the horses, it's really easy. I know for me, when I first got around the horsemanship thing, some of the best advice I got was from Bill Barnes, actually. And it was the first time I was ever at his ranch. He was like, okay, so you're starting to learn this stuff and you're going to get really excited about some changes you can make in horses. And that's a good thing. And you need to have that passion. But you need to understand that you do not need to be giving unsolicited advice ever.
Yep.
Unless you feel like it is an immediate safety threat to you or someone around you. But other than that, it's one of those, you can lead a horse of water, but you can't make them drink things. So that's what happens to all these people at the very beginning when they get around this horsemanship. They're like, oh, now I know this thing, and now I'm excited to share this thing with other people. But the problem with that is, if those people aren't ready to hear it, you just look like you're kind of acting from on high and giving people unsolicited advice, which literally no one ever likes ever.
No.
So that's like an example of that. You have to present your yearning for self-improvement in the right light, or you'll alienate yourself from a lot of your peers, more than likely.
Well, and then you're not probably doing what you're preaching anyway. I mean, that's you can lead them to water, you can't make them drink, or wasn't Ray Hunt said you can lead a horse to something, but you can't make them think, or the people, you can lead a person to education, but you can't make them think, all those analogies or whatever. Yeah, that stuff can be incredibly off-putting. It can also be, there's ego behind it. I mean, there's coldness behind it. I don't know. That stuff is, I'm with you. There's a delicate deal of unsolicited advice that, even if it's the best of intention, it can still be something that's off-putting. And then I know for myself, a lot of times the battle that I run into with that is, I will create something that'll disappoint me. So I'll literally have such a good intention that I run with it because I've been through that. Can I please help you and save you some of the pain? Because I've been there. I've been to this thing. Let me shortcut this for you. I mean, it happens not just with my kids. It happens all the time. And the most, I'm going to say, healing mentality I've created for myself with that is you can't expect a thief to not steal from you. You can't expect a liar to tell you the truth all the time. And when I feel like my wisdom, it needs to be given from my experience, and like I said, best of intention. I don't know that I've ever been like, yeah, I'm going to help you because you suck or because I hate what you think. It's always good intention. But I might see more, I might want more for you than you want for yourself. So I've already put some kind of ideology on you. I've painted some level of imagery of you, and you're not what I created you to be. So if you aren't that, then you're going to disappoint me. But inadvertently, it was just me disappointing me the whole time anyway. And I think that unsolicited advice slash like, you were talking having one place where you excel naturally in. It doesn't mean that person that you think you could shortcut their learning curve is wired the same. So therefore you're probably going to get disappointed again. You meet that person, you meet a new I've done this before. Like I meet a new person and I get excited. Like it sounds really lame and pathetic, but I get excited. Like that's a new friend right there. Like that's going to be a good friend. And then I'll inadvertently put stuff, assume things, I'll say, about that person. And then when they don't fit that assumption, it like breaks my heart, or it used to. I'm conscious of it now. I really hope I don't have to run into it anymore. But then it breaks my heart. And it's like, well, they didn't do that. You did it. You're the one that assumed anything about them. So again, assuming someone wants help, assuming any of that stuff, it's none of my business. It is none of my business unless it's asked for, directly asked for. And Ricky and I have a thing lately we've been talking about. It's like, unless it's directly asked for, and I'd probably wait till they ask twice. So they really make sure they want the trouble of disagreeing kind of thing. So I hope that answered your question.
It does.
It's on the radar big time. It's funny you asked that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like both of you guys are talking about like the process of just maturity, and because that goes hand in hand with both of you guys are saying. It reminds me of what somebody told me about 4 years ago, and it blew my mind at the time in a small way. And they said, they were talking about someone in particular that I looked up to, and he said, yeah, he's really good at this, but you wouldn't ask him how to fix your car. Like, he's not good at that. And then he was using that as an analogy for a lot of other things. But it kind of blew my mind because I do have a handful of people in my life that I look up to greatly. And then that handful of people, there's a couple subjects they're really good at, and then there's a bunch of subjects that they're not good at all. And it doesn't make them bad people at all. But I hadn't really thought of that. Like, in my mind, I thought those, 5 or 6 people, it might have even been less. I don't want to be too specific because people might be reading into things if they're listening to this. I'll start feeling like I'm poking at them. But this handful of people, I was kind of looking at their life thinking, hey, I'll just be just like them. I'll do, down to like, hey, if they got this kind of truck, I ought to get one of those too. That kind of thing, where you just have this little group of people that you're following and you're banking on them because they seem like they're successful and they're good at something you want to do. But after my friend said that started a process in my life that's been ongoing ever since. And it sounds a lot like what you guys are talking about, where it made me, it really opened my mind to the fact that, they were significant people in my life, and there were some things that I wanted to be like, certain qualities they had that I did want to be like, but there was a whole lot of other things they weren't good at. And it wasn't a big deal. It just meant I needed more scope, more range in who I was pursuing or what I was reading. Just finding books and reading classic literature and all kind of stuff. And it's helped me in my own life also start to realize that same thing, that, okay, so if they're not good at everything, sadly, I guess I'm not good at everything too. But I don't know. I don't know how people become aware of that, but I know that person that mentioned that to me, that made a huge difference in my life. Well, I don't know if it made a huge difference in my life yet, but it made a big difference in my thinking so far. But it sounds like similar to what you guys are talking about, just all around maturity. You can't speed it up on purpose necessarily, but you just get there when you get there, and then you work on it probably for the rest of your life, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, you just struggle, spin your wheels, and then I guess they put you in a hole in the ground one day, right?
Hopefully
Yep.
it's worth it more than that.
Speaking of improvement,
That's what I'm banking
Sarah,
on.
Yeah.
your pauses are getting really good.
Uh-oh. I couldn't
We
hear
were
you
working
again.
on that, Joe, before you got on here.
Did we lose it?
Podcast pauses. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but she's getting really good at that. She's like a podcast pro.
Oh, not interrupting. That's what he was saying. I'm working on not in reacting so much through a sentence.
Oh, she's a pro.
A
Um,
lot.
Ben, you had a really good point there because I've been, and it kind of goes back to what Sarah was saying too, where you meet people and you put maybe you put expectations on them, and it can happen. Like maybe there's someone looking up to someone, and then there's someone who's in the opposite role. Maybe they've got someone they want to help. But I know, um, in the past, I've been very like prone to this. I feel like a lot of young men are, but like, going through high school and then early 20s, I could be very prone to like hero worship, to where it's like there's this person and it's like, oh, this guy's awesome, and then da 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 da, and you want to be like that person, obviously, and it's good to have strong role models. But the problem comes when you kind of take it too far and you almost like deify that person, and then gradually over time, it's what always happens is you get to know them better, and then you get to like understand someone's flaws, and then you can maybe, if you're like a immature guy and you don't really like understand that, yeah, everyone has flaws. You thought like there were a couple people that were impervious. It happens a lot. I know, like I have a really good relationship with my dad, but everyone who like grows up and your dad's your superhero, at some point you like get to the age where you're like your dad or your mom or whoever, you're like, oh, they're like people, they're not the superhero anymore. But you can be like almost angsty about it because you're like, you're mad at the world, right? Because like you're supposed to be the superhero, you're supposed to be like the one with all the answers, and then it's like you feel upset about that, but then at the same thing, like on the same side of the deal where they're coming from, it's unfair to them because it's like, well, I never asked you to deify me. I never came down and said I'm some second coming. So why are you putting these expectations on me when all I did was like try to help you or try to raise you to the best of my ability or whatever? And so it's just like become completely, everyone feels like life is unfair at the end because you put people on a pedestal, and then when you realize they don't belong on that pedestal, you resent them for not belonging on the pedestal. They resent you for like, well, why are you mad at me? I never told you to do this. And oh man, it's so tough because I still have a bunch of people that are my role models and people I want to be like. But I guess, like you said, Sarah, the word is grace, where you have to understand, oh, those people are human. And I don't want to become that human. I want to learn from that human and become a better version of me. And that was a lesson I wish I had learned a lot faster in life. But I went through like meeting people, deifying them, resenting them, and then I'd like do that over and over and over.
Yep.
And I think if you have a certain level of testosterone in your body, you're just way more prone to that than other folks might be. But that's that's something I feel like in the last 5 years I've really had to kind of grow through that. And it goes back to what you were saying, Sarah, is now I meet people and I feel like I can appreciate people without putting all those expectations on them and not being unfair to them.
Yeah, well, it's way more freeing individually. Like I'm the same. My dad, I'm a daddy's girl, and my mom is perfect. Also, my mom actually is perfect. My dad, I had to realize, is still human. I'm just kidding, but it's that day. Like I can remember the day where it's like, oh wait, he's a guy, but he still can be my favorite person or one of my favorite people. You know, it's way more freeing to view people and things and experiences that way, where it's like, it can't be perfect. There's one guy that was able to be perfect and no one else can reach that. And shame on me for ever thinking I can, like, I don't know, label a person that way. Your vocabulary is a lot better than mine, but that's the, it's that false idol thing too. I think it's no one ever claimed to be perfect. I don't think. I mean, it's a crazy balance.
Yeah, unless they're like telling you to come live on their farm and like go to there's some cult guys that do that, but most day-to-day people that smart folks, most smart folks can hopefully sort those guys out. I don't know. Yeah. I've never been invited to join a cult, so
yeah, you're right. I guess there probably are people out there who do think they're perfect. You're right. You are absolutely right. But I think that's hopefully that's not the majority.
Right.
But it definitely does happen.
Or Mary Poppins.
And that's but again, most of that is shame on me. I mean, shame on me for any of that, and being peaceful and then being able to forgive myself for that simultaneously. That's fine. Just because, what I view as, well, the thing we all have in common is like good horsemanship. What I view as good horsemanship, I guarantee if all three of us were to write our definition, it'd be different. And we're all students of the same foundation and going, trying to be better all the time. And those are safe assumptions I think I can make, but we're still going to write a different definition, meaning, I have some resentful tendencies on my dark side of my personality, and I'll resent somebody for not warming up their horse right. Like, that's part of horse. But then you're going to tell me you're a horseman, someone who doesn't care about saddle fit. But then you're going to tell me you're a horseman and claim it, as a genuine identity. But again, shame on me that, first of all, they might not know better. They might not have been through the consequence of it, all the things. But I mean it when I say shame on me for putting those categories or implying things on somebody of what, by my definition, it might be different. And you might have plenty of things that you'll judge against my horsemanship when I tell you I'm a student of horsemanship, whatever the thing is. I mean, you can do it. Obviously, people do it parenting all the time. People do it in relationships all the time, whatever. I mean, pick your poison. That's an easy thing to do. And I think it's easier to just pick an idol and like discipline yourself to follow that one thing, or one person or one teaching or one method or whatever. But I think it's a really delicate thing to not idolize too much, not have any of that worshiping going on. I mean, I'll bet Buck is so proud when he gets to look at all, or I hope he's proud when he gets to look at all the people that he has put an incredible foundation in, and then how many directions everybody has kind of gone to, I don't know, like, what would you like, verbalize their translation of what the next step is. I hope that makes him so proud, because it's incredible. Whereas you could feel like, and I went through it, like when I, leave the hunter jump world and then just need the, let's say, groundworky foundational horsemanship. And then I get pretty comfortable with some of that. And then I'm like, I'm ready to make a horse that I can rope a cow on and that I could jump a really big fence on. Well, I'm going to have to deviate from Buck's foundation, but that doesn't mean I'm leaving it or losing it. And I think that's a cool part of having a healthy constantly working to have a healthy view and application of what could easily be kind of a culty mentality or a idealistic mentality within me of like, you have to stay on this straight and narrow, or you're not in the club. That's a big deal, and I hope he's really proud of how everybody's gone, and maybe personalized so much of that as the example, because we all three have
Yeah,
that in common.
Yeah.
absolutely.
The I think a good point you make there that I kind of like hold present, um, again, trying to grow and establish myself a little bit more. Um, you're talking about like judging, and I I might not be able to articulate it the best, but I'm trying to judge less and analyze more. And so you see someone who's maybe like you said, they don't like that they have a they have they don't do groundwork with their horse the same way we do. And instead of just being like, well, that's different, I don't like that, like actually look at it and kind of be the proof, like, I'm looking at that and maybe it's popping up some red flags for me, and this is like X, Y, and Z why I think that's not working out.
Mm-hmm.
And until, and I'm still not going to judge that person because it's not my job to judge them, you know. And
Sure.
so, but I need to be able to have those thoughts and then have them be supported.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of people in the like horsemanship world, honestly, just the horse world in general,
Mm-hmm.
they like, it feels good to be a part of a tribe, and you're like, look at that person, they're not doing it like us, i.e. they're wrong. And it's one, like, I think there are a lot of, I don't think a lot of very good horsemen do that, but I think there's a lot of people who are maybe at the beginner, like between beginner and intermediate, where they can get some things done with the horse, but they're like, okay, I'm like, I'm gonna stick to this creed, and then all that other stuff, it's bad because it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, if you really believe in what you're doing, maybe you're not the expert in it, but you need to be able to look at that and articulate why you wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if you can't do that, if you can't articulate, I wouldn't do that because X, Y, and Z, then it's a lot tougher to dismiss whatever is going on with the horse,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. You talk about someone like Buck Brannaman. Obviously, he's got like such a strong foundation, with his learning from Ray and all that. But gosh, I mean, the guy's like traveled the country and like traveled so much internationally. Like, he's gotten to watch a lot of horses go around. And there's a lot of people in that situation. And typically people who are really good and really handy, they've seen a lot of examples. And so you get probably good at that process, I would imagine, of, oh, that person I don't know from Adam, they've got this and this going on that I think's really good. And then if I was in that position, I'd probably work on that and change that to maybe fit more how I'd want to do it because of X, Y, and Z. And I think the biggest problem is people pass judgment, but it's like, it's like they write the thesis sentence and then don't write the rest of the essay, right?
Yep.
And they can't support anything they do. And that's a big problem,
Yeah.
because it, like I said, if you want to write something off as, oh, I'm not interested in that, and trust me, I see plenty of that stuff where I'm like, I don't think I need to be involved in whatever's going on over there. But I make sure I can tell myself why I don't need to be involved, because otherwise you can end up being very closed-minded.
Right. For sure.
Yeah.
My little horse that I ride right now, I don't get to ride as much as I used to, but to compare two horses that are in my barn, it's like I have one who is a little bit more on the troubled side. He's just kind of wired that way. His bloodlines are that way. He has absolutely bucked me off. I mean, throttled me into the air in the past because I cut some corners, and I went, I'm tired of doing all this stuff. I'm just going to go ride him. And it bit me in the ass. And, it's all, you have to do things right with him. And then the polar opposite is this other horse so you get on that horse or get started with that horse, you have to do some groundwork. You have to get his feet free. You have to remind him that you can bring him peace from getting his feet balanced every time, or I do. And then the other horse is a really dense muscled type of horse. And he is naturally just fine. Everything is fine. He's the type of horse, if something seems, people laugh when I say this, but he literally, not figuratively, he literally looks at you if something bothers him to see, like, are you okay? Are we okay? Like, that's how he thinks first and then reacts. He's just gentle. And so he is so thick and dense that I don't do groundwork with him. I kind of free him up. I stretch him. I do a couple things. I do groundwork later in the ride when his body is soft and loose, and then it becomes cathartic to him. If I were to do groundwork with him until when he's ice cold, to be free and soft, it would bother him because his body would be in his own way. And I don't think a lot of people would receive that very well within like the groundworky, horsemanshipy type of world. But the foundation that I have, I'm pretty confident in the fact that it's absolutely necessary. It's a part of my day with him. But it's different than textbook, and like that kind of stuff is okay. I feel, it's led me to a really good place. I think it is okay. And I forget where I was going with this as a reflection of what you just said.
That happens to me all the time.
There was a reason. So that's the story, but there was a reason. It'll come back to me in a second. Oh, the judgment, where someone might judge me for like, isn't she going to do groundwork on that thing? Because that other big horse just bucked her off, and because she didn't do enough. But it's, if you are feeling of and open and soft is what I'm always trying to do. And I'm not always succeeding, but I'm always trying to be open and soft and see the whole picture. What's the reason they're doing that? Like, what is it? And I think there's a lot of peace in that. And then grace comes easier for your day. And then guess what? Then Sarah's day is better because she went about it more gracefully. Going about it as a know-it-all, ugh, that sucks. I've tried that. It sucks.
Yeah. Hey,
Yep.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Much
Yeah.
better.
All right, good. Because Sarah, you just said something. You were making me think, and then you said judgment. And judgment's a good thing. But man, it can be kind of divisive too. And I'm curious your thoughts, because you've been around this horse deal way longer than I have. But something that I've picked up on, and I don't really have an opinion on any of this stuff. I told Joe a few weeks ago, I think I told you that. I said, man, I don't even want to talk about this stuff anymore. I want to like write a book about it someday when I'm like 100 years old, and that'll be my thoughts. But I'm gathering my thoughts, so that's what I'm going to ask you. I'm not telling anybody anything. So you know how when we listen to a couple of doctors speak, you might have your own opinion, and then you'll hear his opinion, and you think, I kind of like that, yeah. And then you hear another guy, and you're like, okay, that's way off. And so you hear these opinions from professionals, and it's not really something that's in your wheelhouse, but you've read enough that you have a little bit of an opinion. So your thought isn't, oh man, I hate these guys. It's kind of like, hey, it'd be cool if they all talked together and then they sorted this out and I could listen to it. Like, you want to hear a debate. I think the same thing when I hear stuff in the horse world. There's people I look up to. I respect their opinion. I'm even kind of particular about who I want to follow. But then I hear another opinion, and honest to God, my first thought is not like, gosh, dang it, he's from the enemy's camp. That's wrong. No, I'll just objectively think sometimes, okay, no, I don't think I want to do it that way. Or I'll just think, oh, that's not the way I've been taught. That's not what we do. But I don't have animosity. And a lot of times what I end up thinking is, you know what? I would actually love to hear that guy talk to this other guy. I would love to hear them talk. But a lot of times that idea isn't really approached like, oh yeah, that would be cool to have a debate. Instead, it's like, oh yeah, they should have a fight about that. And I've even heard people say things like,
Right.
you've got to stand up for the truth. But when they say stand up for the truth, it's not really like like just standing up for the truth until your truth isn't right anymore, and then maybe you have to learn something, or maybe your truth is right and the other guy will learn from you. It's more like, no, we have a truth and we can't, let our flag touch the ground, so to speak. And it is kind of interesting how, like, I think it's good to have a way that's right and to perfect it. But I also don't think there's anything wrong with debate. And it seems like the idea of debate in the horse industry is almost more of like, it's very flavored with like fight and tribalism rather than like have a debate. And you could even be friends afterwards, but you are obviously doing something different than someone else, and it's not a big deal. And I don't know how you go about, I'm not even trying to say certain people should have a debate, but I think at the end of the day, it's fun even to be in a camp, and it's fun to take sides sometimes because it's probably instinctual for us. But man, at the end of the day, there's only so many of us riding horses, and it almost feels like we want less people to do it. And
Right.
then I hear people in other industries. I'll listen to podcasts about stuff, and I'll hear people in other industries, and they're just excited for more people to do the same thing they do. And they're like, hey, I don't care if he does it different than I do. I don't want this to die. And here we are living in a modern age that the horse industry, I mean, from the time I even got into it till now, I've completely revamped how I think of it and even what I want to do in the future with it, just because of the future and how we use horses. And so the thought of just fighting for the rest of my life with other people that don't agree with me, to the point where we just weed out everybody and then nobody does it anymore. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but sometimes there's this really bleak outlook. Whereas I don't know why I think this way, but when I hear different opinions, or even opinions different from the people that I look up to, admire, and learn from, it doesn't really bother me. And if anything, I'm like, hey, it would be really cool to hear them talk about that. And just like a couple of scientists, it'd be like if you had, if Einstein sat down with, I don't know, Nikola Tesla and just had a conversation, I guarantee you they had different thoughts about things, right? And I'm sure there's the camp people who would want to be on either side. But in the end, can okay, we'll just keep it theoretical. Can Nikola Tesla advance physics or engineering to the greatest pinnacle in human history? Or can Einstein advance physics by himself to the greatest point it could ever get to? Or would they do better working together? And that's how I think, we've just finished talking about how people can be very good at something, but they're not necessarily good at everything. And it's not a hit against them. We're all human. And some other humans are very much more gifted than other humans. But sometimes it's just a comment or a thought that you get from someone else. But that is how you advance things, is by talking about them. And like Joe just finished saying, maybe you shouldn't come in. I mean, you do it if you want, but if you want to get better, don't just take a different side or take a staunch opinion. If you're just doing it to be different, if you have nothing to back that up. So debate would only ever show, the hairline fractures or the gaping chasms in your argument. So anyway, that was a long rant, but I think about this stuff all the time. I love all these guys, and I really want to be humble, I don't know who's listening to this, but it is something I think about all the time, because I have a lot of different friends, and I don't try to learn from all of them. There's a lot of people that I'm just nice to, because I think to get better, especially being young like me, I got to keep my blinders on a little bit. I've got to just work hard, but I try to be friends with a lot of these people, and I don't know what to make of it all the time, but I think about it a lot, and it doesn't seem that constructive. That's all I've concluded so far.
I think that I think our age group, and I think I'm a lot older than you guys, but generally this generation is doing a really good job of. I got to be really careful how I say this, but we're doing a good job like being on each other's teams. I think there's some of the older horse people where it's like you have to be on this line or you're or you're nothing to me. And I think that's a shame, because I love how it is right now. I mean, there's so many people that, and I'm not saying it's been perfect all the time, but there's a lot of people in our world that you could call at any moment, and you have some level of resource or some level of wisdom or some level of experience that you can tap into. Whereas when it's kind of soured and one way, or only Einstein, you're going to miss what the other guy brought to the table. And I think we're doing a good job. Like, I've said it for a while. I'm kind of proud of our age group, because we're doing okay with just supporting each other. And I'm sure there's bad blood somewhere, but even just within, let's say, the colt starting world, everybody's wanting to help everybody out. Even in the horse sale world, you don't have something I have, here's 2-3 numbers you can call. And or let's say I don't have something that you want, guy calls me, I don't have what you want, but here's 3 guys you could call, and you're going to be able to trust them, you're going to get a good price for what you're getting, and there's going to be quality. I think it's really cool. Like I said, I'm proud of us for that. I think we're doing okay on that, instead of like some of the older stuff. It's everyone wants to be Ray Hunt's favorite child, and then they hate each other for not being that way, and it's just sad, because what they could be if they all came together would be a pretty neat thing.
Yeah, and you were talking about
no
having grace. You were talking about having grace a minute ago, and I don't see why. If you're trying to get better and you're trying to be the best you can be, and in a certain way that you want to do it, why can't you do that and still have grace and understanding for other people, and let them do their thing, and not just let them do their thing, but be friends with them, and definitely don't talk bad about them. And you hear from any successful person in the world, and they say you'll never meet a hate talker who's doing better than you. And I don't. All I know is I'm just looking at my own life and going forward in my life. If I can't be the best I can be in the very way that I want to be, without, I want to make sure I'm saying this right. I'm getting all tongue twisted too. But basically, if I can't do what I'd like to do to the best of my ability in the way that I'd like to, and still be kind to other people, and not just be kind and say like bullshit stuff like, oh yeah, and just be fake kind, but be real kind. Like you said, like be the kind of guy who they can call you up and you'd be there for them, or you can call them up and they're there for you, because you're not fake kind just to be nice, but you're really actually their friend. If I can't do those things simultaneously, then what's the point, right? Because we made a trailer recently, and it's been in my head a lot because I'm not great at this stuff, so I've been editing the crap out of the thing. But I keep going over the little spot where Joe had a little blip, and he said to one of our guests, it sounds like what you're saying is be the change you want to see in the world. And I keep thinking about that, because it's like everyone wants to talk about the change they want to see in the world, or like admonish it, or tell other people how they should do it. But I think we just said we're humans, so we're not perfect. But if there's not at least a hope of someday just being the change you want to see in the world, and doing that yourself, and then being kind, being real kind, being a good friend, being happy for the other people's success, even if it's totally different than what you do. I wouldn't see a lot of future in doing this personally. If it was like a law where you couldn't do it and act that way at the same time, I'd be like, okay, cool, I'll do something else where you can act like that. Because it just, I don't know, I think you'd get cancer or something. I don't know.
I think you're right. That's great.
Wow.
Anyway.
Well, there you go. I guess we just solved all the problems right there.
We're really smart. Just ask us, okay?
Yeah, all 3 of us got our rants in, and now we can can feel good about life.
Yeah. Now we can move on to.
I agree with you, Sarah, that I think it's in everything. You can't have that scarcity mentality. Mm-hmm. It's very healthy if you can do it. It's a lot harder, but if you can approach things in like an industry or a business or an art or a craft as a rising tide lifts all boats sort of deal. Like a super plain example would be just you're talking about like the Western industry. Everyone we've had on that has anything to do with like performance horses or the Western industry in some capacity has talked about like how good Yellowstone has been, right? For horses, for cowboy hat sales, like everything. People just like want this stuff going on. And I mean, I'm one of the people. If you know just a little bit about ranching or that lifestyle, especially in the beginning of Yellowstone, you can kind of watch it and it's really easy to be a hater because you're like, this isn't what life on a ranch looks like at all. Like, let alone, all the like dead bodies out back, they, in the beginning, it's like the Montana Sopranos basically. But, you watch him like going around and he's got like a cutting saddle on and then like a rope hanging from it and like just stuff like that. And you're like, look at these people. And so it'd be really easy to be a hater where is, down the line, you didn't know what that first couple episodes was going to create. And it's like, you should look at it as like, man, these are some high profile actors on a high profile network promoting a Western lifestyle that's kind of been, could be considered like fringe in some places, like a fringe group of people. And so putting this in the spotlight, that's only a good thing because having awareness is only a good thing. And like, that's the example I think about a lot where it's like just because this person is doing well, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily taking from you. If you're talking about a horse industry, you can't just, it's not like there's a limited number of licenses to own a horse in the United States. And so it's like, well, that person has so many people going to a clinic or that person has so many people going to the shows with them. It's like, well, that's okay because we'll just make more horse enthusiasts, and so it's a lot harder because I think like Ben said, we're like hardwired from our like tribe days of thinking of that scarcity mentality. Like I got to get mine. And if that means you don't get yours, I'm totally okay with that. But in a lot of ways, our reality is not like that for things like this anyway. And it's hard because you have to overcome your wiring. Again, the testosterone doesn't help a whole lot either. But if you can keep that perspective, you end up with a much more peaceful coexistence.
Yep. I can be plenty resentful, and my testosterone is on the low level, so. It's funny.
Yeah. But I think, Joe, I mean, you have a good point there. It's not that you become perfect, but it's a change of attitude. And, I mean, you made me think there of, if you're familiar with, what is that book? Robert Kiyosaki, that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He talks about the Chicken Little attitude. And you can go, the sky is falling, and that's just your attitude. Then you're always going to be down in the pits. But if you just having a positive attitude is a big deal. And speaking of that kind of thing, like a guy like Robert Kiyosaki and then Dave Ramsey, they're very different, right? But they just want, people to do well and have financial peace and stuff. I've heard those guys debate, whether or not they really like each other off camera, I don't know. But I think it's cool that they get on there and debate and they're not mad at each other. And they talk about their ideas and they're very different. And they even end their interview by saying, well, Dave, I think you're doing a good job, but I just totally disagree with you. Like, that's awesome, And then you come away from listening to something like that and you're not left all what's the word? You're not left confused. If anything, your mind's more made up on how it fits your life, It's great. So I think that's a cool attitude. But like Joe was just saying, hey, I don't know. We're not going to be perfect, but you can certainly try to get a better attitude. And all these conversations, it helps me want to be that way. I can't make anyone else act different, but I want to have a good attitude. So when I'm screwing up and everyone else is screwing up too, at least I can have a good attitude and keep on keeping on.
I agree. Good reminder.
So we haven't really gotten to ask you, pick your brain about any, I guess, veterinary, medical stuff like that, however you want to classify it. Um, but one of the things I I did want to ask you, because I feel like you're a good person to, at least if you don't know something, you might know the right place to find it. Um, I have gotten a lot more interested in um, rotational grazing lately.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we've always done, but like it's I'm way more interested in it now. Just kind of the dynamics here at the ranch have changed in terms of, we're doing less corn, doing stuff like that because just prices of inputs have changed. So we're getting more into grass, and that's all good stuff. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts because you're someone who might know this. Um, have you ever looked into or like known anyone who successfully like rotationally grazes their horses? And if so, can you talk
Oh.
about that a little bit?
I was going to say, yeah, I got a great resource for you. I don't know if she does it with horses very successfully, though.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
I don't know that
yeah.
there are a lot of people. So it's kind
Horses
of
are,
my white whale now.
yeah. Horses are hard because of how they graze. So
Right.
I think that's the big, I don't know, it's harder to control. I mean, my rotational grazing is like, um, going with my gut on what kind of pressure I feel has been put on that section, and then pulling the animals off of it and praying that it rains at the right time.
Yeah.
Which that's not real sound, but no, I definitely I could send you to in the direction of some people. Well, Ryan Brand, have you had him on? No, you haven't had him yet.
I don't
Ryan
think
Brand
so.
is one that is very educated in that, and then there's a lady named Marlene Moore who's from around here, and she is brilliant. I mean, their place is unbelievable.
Hmm.
She'd be your person. I'm definitely not that. I'm not that resource for sure.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's totally fair. But yeah, that's we don't need to get too into it here, but that's something I'm like really trying to think
Yeah.
about because we are fortunate in Virginia.
Yeah.
We have a lot of grass. Like
Mm.
there's grass everywhere,
Yeah.
and sometimes it kills me where like I feel like a lot of times you see people's places and you're like, it seems like the grass is very underutilized, or like
Mm-hmm.
you have this, you have that, or something. Like a lot of times it gets way too high before you can ever get it grazed, and then
Mm-hmm.
your kind of rotation's all screwed up because you're never going to get that grazed in just the right spot and things like that. And so the rotationally grazing horses thing, that's like one of my new white whales when I have all this free time that I imagine that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, cool. Well, I'll definitely hit you up about those people because I'd love to
Yeah.
talk to them. So,
Yeah.
um, on another note, well, I'll let Ben go. I'm not going to hog you.
Well, what do you got there, Joe? I mean, you got more?
No, I was gracefully trying to avoid saying that I forgot what I was going to say next.
Oh, gosh, I see. I just
Oh.
wanted to bring that imperfection out of you.
Yeah, there
Well,
you go.
what? So what I did do, and this might be kind of fun. We wanted to have you back on and talk about nutrition. Joe just brought up rotational grazing. I don't know a ton about nutrition, and so with horses, it's always been kind of common sense. So I was like, yeah, let's do that. And I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to get into that. Sure hope Joe prepared for this. And then when he told me what his day was going like so far, I was like, shoot.
Yeah.
So I Googled the top 10 equine nutritional myths. and a couple things
Oh,
came up. And at first I was like, that'd be kind of funny, Google these things and ask Sarah about that. And I was like, that might be kind
yeah.
of dumb though. So I looked it up, and then there were actually some interesting things that I have thought were true. One or two of them. Some of them are dumb. So I thought, well, shoot. Well, I'll ask her and we can find out. Okay, so this is from,
Okay.
well, first of all, you may even be familiar. This is a website called thehorse.com. So maybe it's a total trope site. Who knows? But maybe they're legit.
No,
But
it's
it's an
great.
article called
I
Seven
think you can
Equine
share your
Nutrition
screen if you
Myths
want, Ben.
Busted. Yeah, I probably could, man. But with the poor internet and stuff, I might just screw the whole deal up.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah,
So
don't risk it.
I better just stick to this. All right, so these are busted myths. So myth number 1: horses have nutritional wisdom and will seek out nutrients to meet their needs. But real quick, let me just see if they're saying. I don't know if they're saying that is a myth or that is a myth that has been busted. But what are your thoughts on that? Horses have nutritional wisdom and seek out nutrients to meet their own needs.
I think if a horse is given a monoculture, one or two types of grass, you can't count on them keeping themselves balanced. I think if a horse has a relatively would you call it native pasture, native grasses, all of those things, I think a horse absolutely can manage themselves pretty well. We have to obviously be their advocate and make sure that they are getting the well-rounded options. But I think they absolutely can. I mean, I think if you don't give some validity to that, there's a hole in that, because when you put new mineral into a horse's pasture, free choice, they go crazy for a while and then they quit. I don't think that's because they've gotten tired of it. I think it's because they have reached a point, or like when the grass is more washy, like you guys, Joe, would have, when the grass is more washy, your horses are going to go through more mineral because they have to balance out the empty nutrients that they get in the fast growing, infinitely growing grasses. So I would say it's a myth that they can't to some degree. My old horse, I used to be neurotic about thistle once we moved to Nebraska. And I'm talking milk thistle, but he would go around like a camel. I mean, even if you're riding him, he would like inch his way to thistle and pop he'd do it like a camel. It was always so funny to me. Like he'd lift his lips and just with his teeth bite the thistle off and eat it. And I didn't have thistle anymore because he was my little manager. And then you come to learn what thistle's properties are, and it's anti-inflammatory. And that was probably the beginning of when he was starting to fuse his hocks, because he's an old man, and I owed him a hock injection and I didn't get it, and he was taking care of it himself. So I think they absolutely can. I think they always need help,
Okay.
but I think they absolutely can.
Okay. All right, next one here. There is a couple of dumb ones, and I'm going to skip over those. But here's one that stood out to me. It's myth number 3. It says beet pulp must be soaked before feeding, or it will cause a horse to choke or rupture its stomach. And then the little part under that says beet pulp. This is what they found, Beet pulp will not cause choke simply on its own. Yes, a horse can experience choke or esophageal obstruction when eating beet pulp, shreds, or pellets, but this is generally a problem that starts with negative mealtime behavior such as bolting, feed, or improper chewing.
Yeah.
So that one interested me because I have horses come in and I'll try to fatten them up sometimes. And I've used beet pulp, and I've had always had pretty good results, but I've had some horses act funny before and thought, it kind of coincided with me switching feed, but specifically using beet pulp, and I've had scares in the past. So your thoughts on that?
I'd say that's a multifaceted answer. The first part of it is I never feed dry beet pulp, and I will even criticize certain grains that have beet pulp as something that it's a little scary how free people can be with it. The scary part of it is, practically however much water you put in, it's going to absorb. So that's, again, the opposite of what we're wanting to do for an athlete, is take moisture from their body. So for me, I don't know that I only feed soaked beet pulp because I'm too afraid of choke and it's swelling in their intestine or stomach, intestine, whatever they're claiming, more than I am trying to treat them as an athlete, because I'm hopefully using them as an athlete, and I don't want to be taking any more moisture from their muscles or their system than I only want to be adding to. So that part of that answer is I always feed soaked beet pulp, mostly because of its potential, and I don't want it drawing from the horse. I want it only giving to the horse. The second part of that with the choke thing, the dental health of that horse has got to be given as much credit as the dry or soaked part of it. Same with a lot of people are getting into feeding alfalfa cubes or hay cubes or whatever. And, you know, the pony club thing is you never would feed that to a horse. You would never feed dry cubes to a horse. And generally it's because you're not wanting to take hydration from your horse. But second to that, your instance of choke, your instance of poor digestion are going to elevate as your horse's dental health is not good. So, you know, I think we might have talked about it last time we talked, but a horse should have their dentals done by a specialist, not just someone that thinks they like doing it, at least once a year. And some horses are twice a year, to keep a balance. It's as fine of a balance as feet. It matters as much as anything because of what it does for your horse's psyche and their whole overall wellness. So the secondary part of any of those things, the soaked element is a direct correlation to dental health, in my opinion.
Okay. Hey, and Joe, if you ever have anything to add to one of these, definitely chime in, because I know you have a lot of experience with feeding. Probably more
Yeah,
than
no,
I do,
this
at least.
is great. And yeah, well, I probably, I just said earlier, I'm not near as knowledgeable, but I have the same background. You know, I did pony club and stuff too, and I would kind of have the same line of thought as Sarah. You don't really want to put anything in that's going to be absorbing the moisture in their body. But no, I honestly, I could like, I was literally, this might be the food poisoning talking, but I was like, man, like this is all great information. Like we should get this somewhere. And I'm like, oh, we're literally doing the podcast right now, so it'll be out there. But like, I just like listen to Sarah talk, so I don't have to say anything.
All right.
You did get a little green again. I did notice that.
Yeah.
You're a little whiter than you
Yeah.
once were.
Oh, that's saying something. It's pretty white to start with.
All right, hang in there,
Next
bro.
myth.
Yeah, we can fix that in the edit. Yeah. For the cover photo, we'll put a little more color in you. Don't worry.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm only gonna do
appreciate
two
it.
more. So here's one. This is kind of interesting. This might be helpful for some of the listeners. This is myth number 4. So I've only skipped one so far. And it says, too much protein makes my horse hot. This is by far the most common myth that we encounter as equine nutritionalists. Think about this. A horse consuming a protein-deficient diet might exhibit somewhat dull or subdued behavior. If you then increase the protein level in the diet to the horse's requirements or beyond, total feed intake also increases. Can the behavioral issues be related to total feed intake, or are they simply a result of going from a deficient diet to one that meets nutritional needs? So talking about too much protein making a horse
Couldn't
hot.
have said it better. Yeah. Yeah. We feed
I
a
didn't
ton
make
of
that up.
protein.
I just read that
I
off the website.
pretty much verbatim would say what you just read. Yeah. It's just,
Okay.
I mean, that's exactly what I'd say. I think a lot of it is people are comparing a deficient horse or a horse, what's the word? Ketosis, a horse in ketosis,
Yeah.
meaning pulling from their body versus a horse that's able to thrive and be present. I mean, that's something that I can talk about. I mean, I'll soapbox big time about like having a horse reach their potential. What are you dragging them down from? Are they really that broke if they were to actually be present? All those things. If you truly have a horse fit, the way they can learn, the way, just a lot of that stuff. It's there's a lot of suppression in what people are calling quality is in the horse world that I see. Protein is very important. It's fragile for sure. The hardest part of feeding high protein is it not going bad in your barn. I mean, I feed, our grain mix is so high, and we've had, well, Robbie Moreland, who's been on here, he, poor guy, got like a ton of it made and then took it in Nebraska. It's fine, but in Texas, it turned on him because of how high the protein was. So I think one of the hardest parts of feeding high protein is the logistics of feeding healthy, safe protein. But horses do very well on a lot of protein. Yep.
I like the way you said that. Yeah. Is your horse really broke if he's firing on all cylinders? In other words,
Right.
because I don't think it's like a big excuse. It's probably more of a misunderstanding, but I know I do, and probably you too, Joe.
Yeah.
We encounter that with clients sometimes. They're like, oh, be careful how much alfalfa you feed him, or, whatever they say, because he'll get too hot, or I won't do that at home when he gets home. But just that misconception that
Well,
probably need
and
to
you can
keep the
do
horse
it too.
broke and let him be healthy
Yeah.
and be vibrant.
Yeah, there's a balance to it for sure. I mean, you can be doing your horse an injustice. Their intake should match their outtake or their demands. You can absolutely have a horse like they're on so much alfalfa, it's like you've had them on an IV of Mountain Dew. Absolutely, can that happen? Yes, but in general, if you're using your horse, you've made an athlete out of them, all the things. I'm glad you brought that up, because the balance of how you use them versus what you're putting in is a very fragile balance. But in general, protein gets a bad rap in relation to how the horse needs it, I guess.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, well, that's why I'm here. I just unknowingly wander into different topics that I know nothing about and help pull information out. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go for
We just
any
kind of
thoughts
Forrest
on that,
Gump
Joe?
our way through this thing. So
You guys.
I was telling Sarah too before we got started.
Read the
'cause
next one.
We had a little talk about just doing podcasts, I said, hey, they're just getting so much funner to do all the time. All right.
oh yeah,
Okay, here is one that I had never thought about, and now I'm curious about it. Myth number 6. Giving hot water to a horse will cause him to colic.
Giving hot water is the question?
No, that is the myth. Okay, I'll read more about it, because they have a lot of extra crap under all of these. But it says giving hot water to a horse will cause him to colic. In quotations.
Sorry.
Everybody in the horse world knows that a horse will colic if he drinks water when he's hot and tired after
Oh,
exercise.
I missed the comma. I got it
Oh,
now.
you know what? No.
got it.
I totally misread it. No, I misread it. It's giving water
To a hot horse.
giving water to a hot horse.
I'm like, who
See,
feeds
I
hot
just said
water?
I'm not.
Okay.
oh,
Cut.
Yeah. So it's giving
This
hot
episode's
water.
going great.
No. So I did it again. Giving water to a hot horse will cause him to colic.
Yeah.
Okay. And you know what? Now that totally fits. I'm glad. I do want to know your answer, because it's very hot here in Georgia. We ride until it gets too hot in the day, and then we quit. And a lot of times we swing off and go walk over to the water tank.
Yep.
So are we going to make our horses colic?
Yep. So again, it's a more than a yes and a no for me. How are you cooling down your horse? What kind of fitness level? What kind of asks have you put on that horse is the precursor to being able to answer that question. So, I really value, and it's probably more of something. I'm probably more comfortable with talking about fitness than nutrition, really. And having a horse truly warmed up, having a horse to where they are soft in their mind, to where they can be warmed up, which is, again, any horse is different in that. Some horses are gentle enough you can just start and go, yeah, I have this horse warmed up, and now I can ask something of him. Some horses are touchier, and you have to get there. But I'm going to go off track for a second. I'm a big advocate of a little bit gets you a longer way than like my personality type, I want more now because that's what I've asked for and that's what I think is going to get me more. If you are asking a horse, if you have a horse warmed up and then you're asking a horse to do something, they do it well and you quit, I firmly believe that goes a lot longer than doing it until the horse has reached any level of exhaustion or any level of fatigue. I think there becomes a learned element of fear that we can put in them. And I'm kind of saying that on a fitness and also on a horsemanship front. The balance of that takes obviously trial and error and finding that line all the time. But the hot horse drinking water question goes back to how did you warm them up? How did you use them? How did you cool them out? And what kind of frame of mind are they in? And then, because the example would be like a steeplechase horse for me, like the ask that a steeplechase horse is the pressure that a steeplechase horse is put on it physiologically is immense. But there's a trainer, there's all of the things that goes into making that horse ready for race day is huge. So their fitness level hopefully matches what you asked of them that day. Their warm up, their cool down, all those things are prioritized. You can have a horse that is still panting, blowing after a steeplechase race, and because its fitness level matches what you've asked of it, you can give it a little bit of cold water. You'll put ice water down their back, and then you'll pour alcohol on top of it to cool it off even faster. But could you do that to a fat 2-year-old that has been, 5 rides and just pulled off of Virginia grass? No, you would absolutely colic that horse because what its capacities are greater than what you've been asking it. So for me, there's way more to it than giving a horse water when it's still hot, and that's the big picture. It's just got to be the big picture, and there is an immense amount of, in my opinion, there's an immense amount of science behind a horse's fitness, and getting that right, and what that buys you when you do have it right is a lot of lenience,
Okay. Well, could I give you sort of an
I have
example
a follow-up
that
if
pertains
that's
to me?
okay, Ben. Oh, you go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I started talking before you started
Go ahead,
talking,
Ben.
but then you started talking. All right, I'll go real quick. So, like I said, it's pretty hot here, and I'm riding a bunch of horses, and I'm trying to now ride them all before about 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So,
Yep.
around 6 o'clock, honestly, it's already getting around 75, 76 degrees with humidity. So by 9:30, it is 85, 86 degrees. Some days it's close to 90, maybe a little bit above. And we have a covered arena, have a decent breeze. And so, I'll do a lot of walking, flexions and things, and then I'll trot for a bit, and I'll do some canter work, nothing crazy. I get my transitions, try to get things nice. And then it's probably from the time I end canter work and, do maybe a little bit at the trot again for a minute. And then I'm at the walk a lot, and it's probably 5 to 10 minutes before I sit there, and I might swing my rope a little bit, and then I swing off, and then he'd get some water then. Now they're wet, they're sweaty, they look hot, but they're breathing. I do put some thought into it, very uneducated thought, but I like to work out, so I just try to treat the horse like I would treat myself. I can feel their heart rate, I can feel their breathing. That's all kind of come down, and then they drink, and then I turn them out, and that's about it. So
Then they drink, and you're asking what I thought of that.
Do you see any
I lost
red
you there.
flags? Yeah. Just any. Do you see any?
Yeah.
I don't know, red flags in that routine with our heat here.
Nope. I think that's just right. That's the same climate that I did a lot of my, most cardiovascular demands on horses, and your sounds just right. And just being aware of it all the time. I think there's a lot to a passive recovery and an active recovery. As much active recovery as you can get in there is a big deal. Knowing that you can bring their breath down from trot work in the walk versus, when you have a horse absolutely exhausted and you just owe it to them for a second to let them stand. that generally is not ideal in my world. And then always having in the equation that canter work can be very deceptive because of the mechanism of cantering. So you can think your horse is fitter than it is when you're doing canter or lope or whatever we want to call it, because of the mechanism of how the guts actually, as they rock forward, as their forehand is down and they're rocking forward, the guts actually deflate the lungs, and then as they rock back, the guts rock back in their rib cage, and that will pull air into the lungs. So it actually helps them. The canter actually will help a horse breathe better than maybe their fitness is. And so I think as long as a person's aware of that, you're like, this horse is, wow, he's doing better than I thought. He's probably reached some level of fatigue on a soft tissue level if you're not aware of it. If you're aware of it and you have to push fitness to get more fit, we all know that from ourselves. But having all that in the whole picture, I think, is a really important thing. A rule of thumb, I don't know that the science to this other than track record and some pretty awesome mentors having said this, a rule of thumb to follow with things is if you are watching your horse's breath, which is our most simple way to evaluate fitness, think of their breath being about 2 weeks ahead of their soft tissue health or their soft tissue fitness. So if you have a horse where a 10-minute trot, you've been at a 10-minute trot for a month, and they now don't blow more than a minute once you're done that 10-minute trot work, their soft tissue is still 2 weeks behind being that fit, truly that fit, where you are still reaching a level of fatigue to get in a more fit, let's say next level or whatever, fit level, if you want to call it that. So your system sounds great to me. When I'm on a time crunch as far as weather and stuff goes, I pony a lot of horses. So I'll pony the one I'm warming up on the one I'm cooling off to get them rolling. And then once the one you're on is truly cooled down and you can give him a drink and you can let him stand without doing a detriment to him or her, then you already have your next horse kind of warmed up because you were just kind of letting your horse get level and flat and working on your good walk and maybe your steering, whatever you want to pass the time with, on your next one. And it saves a lot of time. I mean, if you're multiplying 10 minutes every ride, it's just a little tidbit there that I'll utilize it quite a bit when it's super hot.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And they get gentle to it. I mean, they get more broke. When they kind of, I think ponying is great because they have to learn to think for themselves a little bit too. And you get a little competition in the two horses you're on and the boundaries in that it's fun stuff, I think. But
yeah. So can I want to tell you two things I've heard about cooling off horses over the years, and I'd love to get your opinions on it. Because I'm not, maybe they don't conflict, but to me, maybe they do. So one, I can't remember who said it, but it was some eventing barn, and he was kind of like an old time eventer, but he'd been pretty successful and kind of well respected. And they talked about, he's like, after you cool your horse off, like after you walk them out, that was the term they used. If you've had a really long ride, you should loosen your girth, tie your horse up, sit down, have a drink, and then go and unsaddle your horse. And I think the thinking on that was, if they're really hot, you just allow that to be like a slower process, like the heat dissipating. And so I can't remember how old I was when I heard that, but that was just something I was like, okay, sounds good to me. I mean, I loved the idea of like, you've been riding for 3 hours and then you could like come and sit down and be like, okay, well, I'm going to spend like 15 minutes here relaxing, and then I'll go get back up and finish taking care of my horse. So I love that idea. And then the other thing, I've been forced to kind of address this fitness issue more now that I've started playing polocrosse.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is very demanding on a horse. I mean, even more so in my opinion than polo, because the turns are more and you don't get to swap horses. It's like one horse the whole time.
Oh, I didn't know
Yeah,
that. Okay.
you get one horse per tournament, and the tournaments are 4 games. So
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, and yeah, so it's interesting. There's actually like the last tournament we were at, we were in uh what's it called? Warwick? No, Waldorf, Maryland. Um,
Okay.
and it was actually a big part of our strategy was controlling like, okay, here, like we're going to make a real big push in this chukka to get ahead, and then we're basically just going to play keep away and try to save our horses for the afternoon game. Like we're
Okay.
not going to like keep pushing. But anyway, one of the big things there is like now everyone like ices the legs, ice and poultice, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm all for it. But like I've heard some rhetoric there where it's like, well, yeah, you should. The sooner you can ice those legs, the better. And I'm like, so now you see where in my mind it's kind of too. It's like, well, but you're supposed to like let them come down slowly and not do that. Not unsaddle them until they've completely cooled down, and let all that happen, not shock their system. But at the same time, the longer you allow those legs to be hot, more inflammation, all that sort of stuff. I'm sure you know better than I do. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on one, the unsaddling deal, and you kind of answered it a little bit with how it depends on fitness, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
kind of, maybe if they are a really fit horse, you can just go start putting cold water on them and it's fine. And in that situation, hopefully you did bring a fit horse to do that. But what about the icing of the legs and things like that? Would you say it's like the sooner you can get that inflammation out, the better, or how would you handle that situation?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do is related to movement, how you can utilize movement within all that in would
Mm-hmm.
be how I would manage a horse. So I love the idea of waiting, and I do it, waiting a little bit to, I'm going to say, let their backs get cold. Now that has different meanings to different people. But after I unsaddle a horse, most of, like on my side of the barn, we just have tie stalls. And over on my side, I have like a wool, I don't know, it's like a little Pendleton scrap is what it is. I have like a wool thing. I'll pull my saddle and then I'll throw that over the back. So the back, those huge muscles of the back that we use all the time, they don't just go. Now, not when it's 100 degrees out. I'm not saying there's any need for that in that. But when it's 60 or below, I'm throwing something on their back as they're standing there. Once they're not blowing anymore. They're to the point I can take their saddle off, and I'm comfortable with them standing still to where they have, work their muscles through the cool down. I do try to keep their backs warm. So I don't necessarily leave them saddled, but I'll pull the saddle and then I'll throw something over top of them. Um, and in really, really cold weather, I'll usually put two things on them. I'll put, like a fleece with a wool over top of it. So the fleece pulls all the moisture off so they don't get a chill from, like a re-chill from their sweat. And then the wool holds the warm in, but lets the moisture come off. So that's a completely different climate. We're not thinking about that right now in the middle of summer, but in cold weather, that's a slow increment to a cool, dry horse after they've worked in that weather. And then to answer about legs and stuff, I would say it's pretty related to movement. So once they've physically been moved enough, I personally don't get ice on them instantly, but I would say within 3 hours on those extreme athletes, it's great to have ice going on, and ice and pressure. Like a lot of times it's like what we used to do was soak a pole, not used to, I still do, but soak a polo in ice water and then bandage them with that iced polo. And then you pour, every 5 minutes you're pouring ice water back over them. So you have the compression of the bandage and then the cold to keep the ideal healing. I've heard it said, I think it's 43 degrees is ideal healing. So you're just trying to reach average out body temperature and ice temperature to reach ideal healing so that nothing gets kind of stuck in there. Or if you have a strain of some capacity or whatever, you're kind of asking it. The words we use is like tighten up. You're tightening things back up in an elastic way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think both of those things are just right in their own application.
Sure.
And, you know,
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And honestly, that was kind of the philosophy, the come to peace I had
yep.
with it too. But like I said, I have a lot less education on this, and that's one thing that I've kind of been forced to grow on, because if you're going to do performance horse stuff, you got to learn how to keep your performance horses healthy. So
Yep. Yeah. Fit and sound that's what I was saying earlier. Fit and sound, if that's not on your radar, I don't, you're missing part of the whole horsemanship picture, in my opinion. And I don't mean that judgy. I mean it as you can have so much more. If you have a sound horse and you have a fit horse, it's mind blowing what they can give.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, you heard it, folks. She's not being judgy. She just wants you to have a good fit horse, to be the best that they can be. I think there's a lot more material here.
Yep.
Maybe next time we can even keep going with some more stuff, because, well, and maybe we'll run into some more problems, so we'll have more material for you, or maybe some new website will pop up with some better myths on it. But either way, it's been really fun. Thanks, Sarah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks for making time for us.
Yeah, you too. I hope you feel better.
Yeah, I think I'm on the upswing.
Good.
So
I hope so.
appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, and best of luck to the little dog bite victim, too. So tell him we said hi.
Thank you. Will do.
You bet. All right. See you, everyone.